Imagine you experience a feeling that's just so profound. Like maybe it's a heartbreak that literally aches in your chest, right?
Like a physical pain.
Exactly. Or, I don't know, a moment of joy that's so explosive it makes your vision blur, and you go to describe it to someone.
Right.
But the moment you open your mouth, every word you know feels like a cheap plastic toy. Like the language you were born with is just insufficient.
It's too small.
Yeah.
It's like trying to paint this vivid, roaring, apocalyptic sunset. But someone only gave you, a box of gray and brown crayons.
That is exactly it. The tools do not match the reality of the experience.
And we rely on language
Yeah.
to translate our inner world, right?
Yeah.
So it's terrifying when that translation fails, when you realize the dictionary just doesn't have the bandwidth for what you're experiencing.
Right. It's a fundamental breakdown of communication. And most of us, we just sigh and settle for the closest approximation.
And settle for the gray crayon.
Yeah. But if you're a certain kind of uncompromising visionary artist, you don't just accept that failure, you throw out the box entirely. You invent your own colors.
You invent your own world. And if your vision is truly relentless, you invent an entirely new language to go with it.
Welcome to this deep dive. If you're joining us, it's because you appreciate exploring subjects that completely shatter the boundaries of conventional thinking.
You aren't afraid of the strange or the intensely passionate.
Exactly. Today, we're going on a mission to explore one of the most uniquely ambitious, maybe slightly mad, musical projects of the 20th century.
Oh, definitely mad in the best way.
We're talking about the French progressive rock band Magma and its visionary founder, Christian Vander.
Plus the invention of a totally fictional language called Kobaïan and the birth of a global subgenre known as Zeuhl.
I have to say, looking through the stack of sources you provided for us, translated interviews, historical wikis, literally a fan-made dictionary of a made-up language, it's wild.
And the geology textbook.
Yes, a highly technical textbook about literal volcanic magma, which we will absolutely get into. But what's fascinating here is the sheer scale of the ambition.
Right, because we aren't just talking about a rock band with a clever theatrical gimmick. It's not a stage costume.
No, it's a multi-decade, meticulously constructed universe, an intersection of spiritual seeking, avant-garde composition, and just incredibly intense physical performance.
To understand how something this massive gets built, we have to start with the earthly foundations of its creator.
Right, so imagine being a jazz-obsessed drummer in France in the late 1960s.
And you have a musical vision so intense that French, English, every earthly language feels too burdened by history to convey it.
But where does a vision like that even come from? It doesn't just drop out of the sky.
No, nothing is created in a vacuum. Christian Vander's roots are planted so deeply in the soil of mid-century jazz.
He was born in France in 1948.
Right. Yeah, 1948. And his childhood was, well, anything but conventional. High-level musicianship wasn't a hobby in his house. It was the air they breathed.
Because of his stepfather.
Right, exactly. He's the adoptive son of Maurice Vander, who was a really highly respected jazz pianist. He worked with the legendary French singer Claude Nougaro.
So his formative years are just completely saturated with jazz.
Saturated is the perfect word. From his earliest memories, his ears were being trained by the absolute best.
I read he would listen to Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers on his aunt's phonograph.
Yeah, absorbing those complex rhythms before he could even talk properly. And because of his family, he wasn't just listening to records. He was interacting with living legends.
There's this unbelievable detail from his youth in the sources. The great Chet Baker actually gave Christian Vander his very first drum kit.
Wait, really? Just handed him a kit?
Yes. He was 13 years old. Chet Baker, the cool jazz icon, gives his kid a drum kit.
Think about the weight of that. But it wasn't just a gift, it was like an initiation.
And Vander took it incredibly seriously. He later took lessons from Elvin Jones, too.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Elvin Jones wasn't just some guy. He was John Coltrane's drummer.
Right. He completely revolutionized the drum kit. Before him, drummers just kept time in the background.
Yeah, Jones played with polyrhythms. He played around the beat. He treated the drums as a lead, highly expressive instrument.
It was almost conversational with Coltrane's saxophone, sometimes even combative.
Exactly. So Vander absorbing lessons directly from Jones is a huge piece of the puzzle here.
Which brings us to the most massive gravitational pull in Christian Vander's life. The sun his musical universe orbits around.
John Coltrane.
John Coltrane. The influence here just cannot be overstated. It was life-altering for him.
Coltrane wasn't just a musician to Vander. He was a prophet. a spiritual guide.
Right. If you look at Coltrane's later albums like A Love Supreme or Ascension, it's deeply tied to a quest for the divine.
He was reaching for what Vander later called the ultimate note, or celestial music. It was music as prayer.
And then, in 1967, John Coltrane dies.
And it absolutely devastates Vander. Just destroys him.
It wasn't just like being sad about a celebrity passing. It was a profound spiritual crisis for him.
Yeah, the records show he actually left France because of it. He went to Italy, wandering from jazz club to jazz club.
Just playing gigs, trying to physically process this immense loss.
He really felt Coltrane had opened a door to a higher spiritual plane, and with his death, there was this massive void.
He felt this terrifying compulsion to continue that quest, like someone had to keep reaching for that celestial note.
But when he got back to France and looked at the rock and jazz scenes in the late 60s, he was totally disillusioned.
You have to picture France then. May 1968, student protests, political upheaval, pop music, the British invasion.
Right. And to Vander, it all felt completely superficial. The music felt too light.
Too focused on passing trends or political slogans.
Yeah, or just simple entertainment. He wanted depth, something darker, more disciplined, something with prophetic weight.
He wanted to channel that sheer, overwhelming intensity he got from Coltrane. But he knew he couldn't just copy American jazz.
Right, otherwise he's just an imitator. He needed a completely new vehicle.
So we arrive at 1969. He starts assembling a collective of highly skilled musicians willing to follow him into this dark direction.
But they don't have a name yet.
No, and the story of how they get one is so specific, it perfectly sets the stage for the band.
It's such a great piece of history.
So Vander is in his early 20s. They're rehearsing, but they need a gig. They're at a local club trying to get booked.
And the person working the booking window is like, you can't play without a name.
Exactly. I need something to put on the poster. A very earthly problem for a band trying to reach the heavens.
Oh, practical.
So Vander steps aside. He's at the bar ordering a lemonade, just racking his brain.
Because he knows this isn't just a weekend project. They have a destiny.
Right. He knows something massive is going to happen. And while he's drinking this lemonade, he remembers a piece of music he wrote at 16.
It was called Magma, right? Or Norma.
Yeah, something like that. The phonetic seed was there. And suddenly, the word magma just violently pops into his head.
Just arrived out of nowhere. And he didn't even associate it with volcanoes at the time.
No, it was purely about the sonic quality, the hard M and G sounds. It had the density and harshness he wanted.
Sounded heavy.
So he goes back to the window. We are Magma. And they play the club.
And the result of that gig is legendary.
Yeah. According to Vander, there was an American man in the audience, almost 2 meters tall.
A giant of a guy.
And this man was so moved, so physically overtaken by this heavy, unearthly music that he climbed onto a table.
During the set.
At the end of the concert, he stands on a table and just screams at the top of his lungs that they're the best band in the world.
That kind of visceral, unhinged validation is exactly what they need. It proved the intensity actually translated.
It could physically move another human being to scream from a tabletop. That launched their journey.
The band basically got given a house to rehearse in for months after that.
Now, I want to pause and look closer at that word, magma, because I know he didn't think of volcanoes initially, but the literal geological metaphor from the textbook you sent us is too perfect.
Oh, the rheology of magma. It's a brilliant lens for understanding his composition style.
Let's break this down for everyone listening. Geological magma is scientifically described as thyncotropic. It's a non-Newtonian fluid.
Right, meaning its viscosity changes based on the stress applied to it.
The easiest everyday example is toothpaste. If you hold an open tube of toothpaste upside down, it doesn't flow like water.
It just sits there. It resists gravity.
Exactly. You have to physically squeeze the tube, apply a specific threshold of shear stress before the paste yields and moves. It literally requires force to flow.
And that is an incredibly astute analogy for Christian Vander's music, because Magma's music does not flow easily.
It's not ambient background music for washing the dishes.
No, it actively resists you at first. It requires an immense amount of physical and emotional pressure from the musicians.
And from the audience receiving it.
Yes. The musicians push themselves to the brink of exhaustion, and the listener has to actively endure the complexity.
But once that pressure threshold is crossed, it yields. And it moves with this unstoppable, crushing momentum.
And it gets better. The textbooks note that ancient magmas, like comatites, could reach 1600 degrees Celsius.
1,600 degrees. That melts solid rock. It melts the earth itself.
And that is the exact metaphor for what Vander does behind the drum kit. He is operating at 1600 degrees.
He isn't keeping time. He is applying relentless, blistering, thixotropic pressure to force the music to erupt.
Melting down conventional pop and rock structures.
Precisely. It's why so many skilled musicians cycled through the band over the decades. Playing in Magma is like volunteering to exist inside an active volcano.
Most people simply cannot sustain that level of stamina and physical heat night after night.
So we have this immense pressure cooker of a band, but what did the eruption actually sound like? Because critics had to invent a new genre name for it.
They did. That genre is known as Zeuhl.
Zeuhl being a word from Vander's invented language, which we will definitely explore. But musically, what does it mean?
In the mythology, Zeuhl translates to celestial force, or vibratory music. But sonically, it's a massive amalgamation.
Fusion feels like too small a word.
Let's isolate the ingredients. You have the improvisational freedom and complex chords of avant-garde jazz.
But played with the heavy electric amplification of progressive rock.
Exactly. And then you layer a very specific classical influence on top. Polyphonic choral arrangements reminiscent of Karl Orff.
Right, Karl Orff. For anyone listening, the immediate reference point is Carmina Burana, specifically O Fortuna.
Yes. If you've heard a dramatic movie trailer with a massive choir chanting rhythmically in Latin, that's Orff.
It sounds huge, ancient, and deeply intimidating. And Vander wove that massive chanting energy into a rock band setting.
And alongside Orff, you have the profound influence of Igor Stravinsky.
The Rite of Spring guy.
Right. Stravinsky completely shattered classical music conventions regarding rhythm, extreme dissonance, unexpected accents, shifting time signatures.
It's not smooth, it's angular and jagged.
So you take Coltrane's spiritual jazz, Orff's apocalyptic choirs, Stravinsky's jagged rhythms, and heavy rock amps.
But what ties all those desperate elements together? What's the engine driving it?
The engine is the rhythm section. Specifically, the relationship between the drums and the bass.
Zeuhl is defined by insistent, almost marching drum patterns. It rarely swings like traditional jazz. It stomps.
And paired with those drums is a very specific type of bass playing. The bass tone in Zeuhl is iconic.
It's throbbing, drenched in fuzz and distortion. It feels incredibly oppressive.
In most rock, the bass sits in the background anchoring chords. In Zeuhl, the bass is a lead instrument.
Driving the melody, pushing the music forward with this militaristic repetition.
But according to Vander, the defining characteristic isn't just the written composition, it's the live performance.
The life or death intensity. Vander has this philosophy. Magma has always played as if it was its last gig.
He said, if it were to stop, I'd better die on the spot. That's a genuine operating procedure for him.
He draws a strict line between playing loud and playing with intensity.
Right, he thinks playing loud just for volume is stupid. Anybody can turn an amp up to 10.
Hitting a bass drum hard isn't about physical strength. It's about channeling internal spiritual intensity into the physical realm.
He refuses to cheat the music. If the composition calls for terror, you have to actually reach inside and find that terror. You can't fake it.
Which brings up this absolutely incredible anecdote from the sources about a French television broadcast.
Oh, the Le Grand Échiquier incident.
Yes. I think this perfectly illustrates the danger of Zeuhl. So Le Grand Échiquier was a popular, somewhat highbrow, mainstream TV variety show in France.
And Magma gets invited to play live.
But the producers are terrified. They look at this band dressed entirely in black, not smiling, playing heavy, dissonant music, chanting in a made-up language.
They thought it would alienate the whole audience.
But the main guest that night, the famous actress Annie Girardot, was a fan. She puts her foot down. If Christian doesn't come on, I don't come on.
So the producers are trapped. They have to cave, but they try to sanitize the performance.
They want to file down the sharp edges. Magma is planning to play Otis, a tribute to Otis Redding.
But there's a specific passage with this violent, visceral scream.
Not a rock yell, a sound of pure agony. The producers hear it in rehearsal and panic. They beg Vander, please, you cannot do the scream on live TV.
It will terrify the audience at home.
You have to cut it. And Vander, surprisingly, agrees.
He plays nice, leaves it out of final rehearsals.
But then the live broadcast begins. Red light on the camera goes on, millions of people watching. The song builds and builds,
creating that thixotropic pressure.
And when the passage arrives, Vander doesn't just do the scream. He walks right up to the TV camera, stares into the lens, and lets this unhinged scream rip into the living rooms of France.
Completely betrayed the producers.
Totally betrayed them to serve the music. And what was the public's reaction?
They embraced it.
They loved it. The next day, regular people are stopping him in the supermarket saying it was extraordinary because it was alive.
It wasn't the safe entertainment they were fed every night. It woke them up.
But Vander couldn't manifest that sound alone. He needed incredibly specific collaborators. Two figures stand out, Klaus Blasquez and Janek Top.
Let's talk about Klaus Blasquez, the original frontman. Visually striking, very hirsute, huge hair.
A very commanding shamanic presence on stage.
He was also a graphic artist who helped define their visual aesthetic, including the logo. But vocally, he was a marvel.
He had to be, to cut through that wall of noise.
He had this deep, booming, operatic style, but he came from gritty blues and R&B bands.
So he had operatic power, but with earthy grit. His ability to transition from guttural growls to soaring vibrato was essential.
He gave Kobaïan its authenticity. When Klaus sang it, that sounded like a real ancient dialect.
And then there's the bass player, Janek Top. If the drums are the beating heart, the bass is the central nervous system.
Janek Top is an absolute legend. Vander speaks about him with the awe he usually reserves for Coltrane.
Vander describes Top as existing out of the frame. He said Top plays as if he's upside down or working in reverse of normal logic.
Like he's playing behind a wall. Let's expand on that metaphor because it captures the physical sensation perfectly.
Think of it like hearing a massive industrial diesel engine idling on the street outside. You look out, but you can't see the truck.
You can't pinpoint it.
But the low frequencies are so powerful they're rattling the teacups in your kitchen. It's an omnipresent rumble.
That's Janek Top's bass. You don't just hear it. You feel the barometric pressure in the room drop.
He used heavy distortion, often playing a cello instead of a bass guitar early on, giving it this unique bowing resonance.
But that level of sheer sonic power comes with immense friction.
You can't have two suns in the same solar system.
Top eventually left. He told Vander, "You can't have two captains aboard the same boat."
Initially, Vander didn't get it. He thought they shared the same vision.
But he realized two forces of that magnitude couldn't occupy the same sonic space without tearing the band apart. Top had to go build his own universe.
So we have the spark of Coltrane, the thixotropic pressure, the Zeuhl sound, the musicians. But we've been dancing around the most infamous aspect of this whole project.
The language.
Yes, Kobaïan, the language of the heavens. This is where Magma crosses into a full-fledged mythological world-building project.
We talked about earthly languages feeling insufficient. If Vander's writing about spiritual decay and celestial salvation, singing, "Ooh, baby, I'm so sad," in French just won't cut it.
Too much pop culture baggage.
Yep.
He constructed a completely new sonic vehicle, but the records are clear on what Kobaïan is not.
Right, it is not an intellectual, syntactically rigid language.
He wasn't acting like J.R.R. Tolkien.
Exactly. Tolkien was a philologist. He charted grammar rules and historical roots at a desk. Kobaïan is not Esperanto or Klingon.
It was born organically, almost through channeling. Vander describes words coming to him in dreams and through the tactile act of composing at the piano.
He says, "When I compose, I do not write the music first and then the lyrics. Kobaïan comes simultaneously. It is assimilated."
He describes it as phonetic, vibratory, a language of the heart. The sounds were dictated by what the music demanded emotionally.
If a chord was dark and required a harsh sound, a word laden with Germanic-sounding consonants emerged. If it was triumphant, a vowel-heavy sound appeared.
Now let me play devil's advocate. If he's just at a piano making up sounds that fit the mood, how is this different from a jazz singer doing scat vocals?
Fair question. It's the most common critique.
Why elevate it to language of the heavens instead of just calling it gibberish that sounds cool over a bass line? Doesn't a fictional language alienate the audience?
I'd argue there's a profound difference in intent and emotional resonance. Scat singing is mostly instrumental imitation. The voice acts as a trumpet. It's playful agility.
Right.
Kobaïan is about emotional precision. By removing literal meaning, it forces the listener to engage differently.
Because when I listen to an English song, I'm analyzing the lyrics. Is this a good rhyme? Do I agree with this?
Your analytical brain is a filter. Kobaïan strips that filter away. You can't analyze the lyrics, so you just feel the emotion of the syllables.
It hits the nervous system directly.
Paradoxically, it becomes a universal language. No one understands it literally, but everyone understands it emotionally.
Vander uses a brilliant analogy to defend this. He compares it back to John Coltrane. When Coltrane plays a 20-minute solo, there are no words.
But you understand exactly what he's saying. The grief, the joy.
Kobaïan is the human voice acting as Coltrane's saxophone, communicating a pure state of being.
What's deeply fascinating, though, is human nature. Vander insists it's a vibratory language meant to be felt. But humans are pattern seekers.
We desperately want literal meaning. And the fans actually began to map out the language over the decades.
They reverse engineered it, compiled massive dictionaries based on context clues, liner notes, and the sci-fi mythology Vander built.
And we have to talk about that mythology. He invented a whole planet. It's a full-blown sci-fi epic.
The overarching narrative is sprawling. Earth has become ecologically and spiritually doomed, a place of inescapable decay.
Classic trope of escaping a dying world, but steeped in dense spirituality.
A group of enlightened dissidents realize Earth can't be saved. They build a spacecraft, flee, and colonize a utopian planet called Kobaïa.
They build a harmonious society and achieve spiritual perfection. But the story doesn't end happily ever after.
No, you need conflict. Centuries later, they encounter Earthlings again. A crippled Earth ship is found.
And the Kobaïans rescue them and try to teach them spiritual ways. But Earthlings are going to Earthling.
Exactly. When Kobaïans organize a mission to return to Earth to save the rest of humanity, they aren't welcomed.
They're met with hostility, fear, and violent conflict. The narrative deals with prophetic warnings and the threat of ultimate weapons.
To ground this, let's look at some translations from the fan-made dictionary in our sources. The Kobaïan word for blood is glau.
Glau. You can hear the harshness and liquidity. The word for time is theos.
The concept of the perfect man or God is Krian Kurman, and the angel of truth is Dandai.
And Vander fully committed to this reality. He took on a Kobaïan name, Zevensterein de Gusta.
The other members adopted personas too. It wasn't a theatrical bit like Kiss putting on makeup. It was an attempt to manifest a spiritual reality.
No, we have to address something important historically, because this uncompromising aesthetic collided with real-world politics.
Yes, specifically in the highly politicized climate of the French leftist underground in the 1970s.
Magma was largely and sometimes dangerously misunderstood.
The cultural context of post-WWII France is key. The scars of authoritarianism were fresh. The counterculture was deeply anti-authoritarian and leftist.
So imagine a French critic then. You see a band in identical black uniforms not smiling. The music is driven by relentless martial drum beats.
The singer is aggressively chanting in a harsh, vaguely Germanic-sounding, invented language about concepts like the perfect man.
People jumped to the worst possible conclusions. Rampant accusations that the band had fascist or right-wing militaristic undertones.
They completely misread the intention.
We need to clarify that the historical source material comprehensively shows these accusations were entirely unfounded. We're just reporting what the sources say impartially.
Right. Vander's vision was not a political ideology of dominance. He had zero interest in earthly politics.
His vision was focused on spiritual purification, ecological warning, and celestial harmony. The militarism wasn't about conquering nations.
Exactly. The martial rhythms represented internal spiritual discipline, the grueling battle against inner decay and laziness.
Assembling a spiritual army to ascend to a higher plane, not an earthly army.
It's a profound tragedy of misinterpretation. He tried to invent a language to escape bloody earthly history, and critics strapped their own earthly anxieties right back onto him.
They just lacked the cultural framework to understand it, so they defaulted to historical fear.
So we have this explosive pressure, alien language, epic mythology. But how do you actually structure an album with that?
You can't write a standard verse-chorus pop song in Kobaïan. It required a new architectural blueprint.
Which leads us to their monumental works, specifically their 1973 masterpiece,
Mekanïk Destruktïw Kommandöh, often just called MDK.
This is the album. If you listen to one Magma record, this is where the vision coalesces perfectly.
MDK is narratively the third movement of a larger epic called Theos Hamtok. It focuses on a prophet named Neber Gudat,
who was trying to save the people of Earth from their impending, self-inflicted doom.
urgently preaching that humanity must sacrifice greed and superficiality to achieve spiritual purity.
And typically for prophets, he's totally reviled and mocked by the masses he's trying to save.
Musically, MDK is an absolute monolith, nearly 40 minutes long, built almost entirely on relentless, trance-inducing repetition.
Completely abandoned standard rock structures, no catchy choruses.
Just a heavy, marching, descending bass line paired with a jagged piano progression that repeats and repeats.
But it isn't static. With each repetition, the intensity ratchets up slightly.
The vocal choirs, led by Klaus Blasquez and Stella Vander, become more frantic, counter melodies layer in.
The brass gets louder, Vander's drums become more unhinged, the temperature rises from 1,000 to 1,600 degrees.
Listening to MDK is exactly like extreme endurance sports, like running an ultramarathon.
Very physical comparison.
When you first listen, the repetition feels harsh and punishing. 10 minutes in, your brain rebels. Are they really playing this exact riff for another 20 minutes?
You hit a psychological wall. It hurts.
But if you persist, if you refuse to turn it off and surrender to the rhythm, you break through that pain barrier.
The repetition stops being annoying and becomes deeply hypnotic.
The analytical brain shuts down and you enter this ecstatic musical runner's high. You realize the repetition is a vehicle to induce a trance state.
A sonic ritual to alter consciousness. That's the peak Zeuhl experience. But Vander didn't just remake MDK forever.
Right. The tides shifted in the late 70s. Albums like Udu Udu in 76 and Attack in 78.
He starts incorporating elements you'd never expect. Heavy rock, R&B, funk grooves, even gospel music.
Seamlessly integrated into the Zeuhl framework. Udu Udu has this almost popish sound on the first side, though pop in Kobaïan is still mutant and bizarre.
But then you flip it over for De Futura, composed by Janik Top.
A massive apocalyptic track driven by his distorted bass, dark and propulsive.
And then there's Attack, featuring an album cover designed by H.R. Giger.
The Swiss visionary artist who designed the xenomorph for the movie Alien.
Yes. Giger designs this incredibly visceral, biomechanical, terrifying cover.
But underneath, the music is surprisingly buoyant. Tracks with undeniable funk bass lines and gospel-style vocal shouts.
Just, funk played in odd time signatures and gospel shouts in Kobaïan. Very disorienting, but brilliant.
But the evolution didn't stop. Moving into the 1980s, there's another massive shift, and we have to highlight the crucial role of Stella Vander here.
Stella Vander is a phenomenal figure in this story. She met Christian early on and they became deeply connected.
She calls him her soul sister in interviews, highlighting this profound bond.
She wore many hats. Started with lighting design, then moved into management, trying to keep this uncompromising band afloat in an industry that didn't understand them.
But her most enduring role was as a vital vocalist. However, the 70s iterations of Magma were a crowded sonic space.
Very crowded. Klaus Blasquez booming, brass blaring, distorted bass, exploding drums.
Stella was an essential part of the choir, but she felt she hit a vocal glass ceiling against that wall of noise.
You have to sing with force to be heard. You don't have the luxury of nuance.
So in 1983, Christian created a side project called Offering.
A radical departure. Christian stepped away from the drum kit entirely to focus on piano and singing.
Offering was a largely acoustic project. It stripped away the fuzz distortion and marching drums.
And this newly opened acoustic space allowed Stella to step fully into a soloist role.
Without screaming over noise, she could explore delicate nuances, vibrato, and her soft, expansive range.
She said Offering allowed her to completely free herself and express musical ideas she'd held back for a decade.
Offering also represented a direct return to Christian's roots, the spiritual jazz of John Coltrane.
Deeply improvisational, airy, focused on pure vocal expression. They even covered Coltrane's A Love Supreme.
Proving that Zeuhl wasn't just about darkness and volume. At its core, it was about spiritual searching and light.
Which brings us to the final act. Because if the story ended there, Magma would just be a bizarre footnote in French music history.
A trivia question for music nerds. But they spawned an entire global musical category, the global legacy of Zeuhl.
Zeuhl transcended Magma. It became an umbrella term for any band adopting this pulsating choral avant-garde style.
Initially, it was domestic. French bands formed by ex-Magma members in the late 70s, like Zeuhl.
Formed by saxophonist Yachko Sefer and pianist François Cahen. They pushed the Zeuhl framework into a more traditional jazz rock fusion direction.
Then you had Oui Dorje, formed by ex-bassist Bernard Paganotti, leaning into heavy bass-driven fusion.
And bands with no original members who adopted the ethos. Eschaton fully embraced the operatic choral intensity.
Dune blended rhythmic complexity with technical acoustic chamber music.
But the virus didn't stay contained in France. It crossed oceans and surprisingly found its most obsessive audience in Japan.
The Japanese progressive and avant-garde scenes completely embraced Zeuhl, which makes sense.
The extremity of the music hyper-minimalism combined with manic experimentation resonated deeply with the Japanese underground.
The records highlight a Japanese duo called Ruins, just a drummer and a bassist playing hyper-accelerated Zeuhl.
They took the complex rhythms, distorted bass, and made up language shouting and played it at furious hardcore punk speeds.
Completely breathless, and the founder of Ruins, drummer Tatsuya Yoshida, had another project called Korinjiake.
A full band reviving the massive choral arrangements of 70s Magma, but injected with manic Japanese avant-garde energy, pushing speed to the breaking point.
The tentacles reached even further. Belgium's Universe Zero mixed Zeuhl pulse with dark 20th century chamber music.
Rock in opposition, right? And in the U.S., Karima formed in L.A., blending chanting with heavy, doom-laden textures.
And incredibly, it reached South America. A modern band from Brazil called Papangu.
A truly unique fusion.
Think about traditional Brazilian samba or forró, usually associated with joy and dance.
Now take that syncopated rhythm, played on heavily distorted guitars with apocalyptic Kobaïan chanting.
It creates a terrifying, brilliant cognitive dissonance, blending metallic propulsion with the swing of Brazil.
The definition of a living, evolving global legacy. And we must mention Soleil Zeuhl.
The record label founded in 1998. Dedicated to keeping the genre alive.
They didn't just archive old out-of-print records, they actively fostered new bands and organized Zeuhl festivals in Paris as recently as March 2024.
Proving this isn't just a nostalgic 70s fad, it's a living musical ecosystem.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today.
We have.
Yeah.
Let's reflect on this journey. We started with a young French jazz drummer grieving the tragic loss of John Coltrane.
Finding that earthly language was entirely inadequate to express the spiritual weight of his vision.
So he does the impossible, invents a fictional planet and a vibratory language to soundtrack it.
Forms a band that operates like geological magma, a thixotropic entity requiring immense stress to flow.
Operating at temperatures that melt standard musical conventions, resulting in Zeuhl.
A genre of heavy bass, Orphean rhythms, and choirs that demands endurance but rewards with ecstasy.
And evolves into a global movement from Paris to Tokyo to Brazil. It's a profound testament to an uncompromising artistic vision.
And it brings us right back to the beginning, the utter inadequacy of our everyday words.
Being handed gray crayons when you need to draw a burning sunset, Christian Vander invented Kobaïan because the languages he knew lacked emotional bandwidth.
He refused to be limited by the dictionary.
So I want to leave you with a provocative thought as we wrap up. We live in a world overflowing with communication. Texts, emails, posts.
Yet so much of it feels completely hollow.
As you go about your week, ask yourself, what complex emotions, modern anxieties, or profound joys are you feeling right now that our current languages simply do not have the words to capture?
If you're feeling a specific modern grief or triumph, and English or French totally fails you.
If you had to invent a single sound to express it, a sound that bypasses the intellect and speaks directly from your heart, like Coltrane's saxophone, what would your Kobaïan word be?
It's definitely something worth meditating on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this massive deep dive into the celestial forces of Magma. Keep exploring, keep listening, and don't be afraid to invent your own language when the world's words fail you. Catch you on the next one.